Story 1. "Stay," the radio whispered from the snow outside, even though I'd ripped the cord out of the wall and thrown the whole thing through the door. I stood there shaking, watching my own breath roll out in white clouds while that dead radio whispered again, softer this time, like it was right behind my ear. "Stay. That is the moment that keeps me up. And if you want to know how I got to that moment, it started with quiet. I rented the cabin for 3 nights in late December because I wanted silence. No neighbors, no phone, no work calls. The owner texted a lockbox code and said to bring wood because the small stove was the only heat. The road was thin and white and kept getting smaller until the trees leaned in and the snow swallowed my tire tracks as soon as I made them. By the time I parked, the sun was gone. The cabin was one room with a bed, a table, a stove, and an old radio with big knobs. The air bit my face even inside. The first night the wind shoved the windows like a big hand. I made a fire, boiled water, and said out loud just to hear something, "Guess it's just you and me." The radio cracked, soft at first, then a thin whisper in the static that sounded like my own voice. The same shape, the same timing, just you and me. I turned the dial. Nothing. I turned it off. Still nothing. I told myself I was tired and tried to sleep. Morning looked normal. The quiet was deep and heavy, like snow inside my head. The second night the wind died. The silence felt too thick, like sound had nowhere to go. I told myself not to talk, but after hours of hearing only the stove pop and sigh, I whispered, "Good night," to the empty room. The radio answered, "Good night," in my own voice, a half-second late. I unplugged it fast, heart in my mouth. The cord dangled. The light on the dial went dark. I waited. The whisper faded. I slept in the chair with my coat on and the poker in my hand. In the gray morning I told myself it was some kind of bounce, or a tower I could not see, or the way cold air carries weird. I almost laughed at myself. The owner came by to check the outside propane tank and said, "Sound out here runs in circles. Especially since the fire," he added, like he wished he hadn't said it. I asked what fire. He looked at the trees instead of me and said, "Long time ago," then left tracks that the wind erased in one push. That night I tried to keep the radio out of my mind. I read by the stove until my eyes hurt. I did not speak. Around midnight, the radio clicked on by itself. No dial light, no cord in the wall, just a soft pop and then a wash of static like breath. I went rigid and listened to my own voice replay from the night before, a broken loop crawling out of the noise. Good. Night. Good. Night. Slower each time, stretching the words until they were only air. I grabbed it, yanked the cord, even though it wasn't plugged in, opened the door, and hurled the thing into the snow. The dark swallowed it. The whisper didn't stop. I locked the door and backed away and watched the cold crawl under the sill. For a long time there was only my pulse and the faint scrape of ice shifting on the roof. Then a new sound came from the window frame, a soft crumbling like sand. I went closer and saw gray dust along the wood. Not dust, ash. The owner's one slip hit me in the chest. I pictured another cabin in this spot before this one, black and hot and full of smoke. I pictured someone standing where I stood, needing help, saying words into a room that only answered when the power went out, a loop caught and held by cold air. I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and counted the small sounds. Just before dawn, the wind came back and pushed the door once, hard, like a shoulder. I waited for light, packed fast, and shoved my bag into the car with hands that would not work right. The road down the mountain was a long white ribbon that kept trying to slide. I turned the heater to full and held the wheel too tight. That was when the radio in my car turned itself on. I had not touched it. It went straight to static and then to that thin copy of my voice, soft enough that I had to lean in to hear it. Stay. The word was not a threat. It was a plea. I shut the radio off. It clicked on again. Stay. I pulled onto the turnout, opened the glove box for no reason, and told myself to breathe. "I can't," I said, without meaning to. The car radio whispered, "I can't." One beat later, like a drowning person grabbing at a rope. I drove the rest of the way, down with the radio off. Window cracked so the cold would keep me awake. At the bottom I finally had a bar of service and sent the owner a single line. "The radio is broken." He answered hours later, like he'd waited on purpose. "There is no radio in that cabin." "We took it out years ago," I typed, and deleted so many replies I lost count. In the end I only sent, "I threw it into the snow." The typing dots came and went. He said, "If you go back, don't talk out loud." I will not go back. But sometimes at night when the heat kicks off and the house gets very still, my phone speaks my own words back to me in a dry throat I don't recognize. Not a ring, not a buzz, just the small ghost of a voice in the speaker I did not touch. Stay. Story 2. The first time I saw the sedan, it was 2 a.m., January, northern Wyoming, white out on a 2-lane with nothing on either side but black trees and white fields. I drive long haul. I know how people die on roads like that. You stop if you can. Hazard lights weak, engine on, driver's door open, heater blowing, no one inside. "You need help," I yelled into the wind. The only answer was the rush of air and the squeal of my own wipers. A purse lay upright on the passenger seat, strap curled like a sleeping thing. A phone on the dash buzzed with missed calls that read, "Mom, Mom, Mom," one after another. Bare footprints led from the driver's side into the ditch and up toward the tree line. Bare. No shoes, no boots. Just toes and heels pressed into wet snow that filled as I watched. I called dispatch and gave mile marker 19 and the color and plate. While I was still on the line, my truck's mirror caught a flick of dark as the sedan's hazard lights died, even though I had not touched the switch. And the headlamps sank from dim to off like someone put a hand over them. My skin tightened in one piece. I got back in the cab, locked both doors and waited with the heat on low and the radio down so I could hear anything that wasn't the storm. A shape moved at the far edge of the high beams. Maybe a branch, maybe a person, then nothing but blowing ice. 10 minutes later I eased forward, slow enough to stop if someone stumbled out. Snow hammered the windshield like small nails. The white took the world down to a tunnel just wider than my hood. Then I saw it again. Same car shape in the murk. Same weak orange flash at the corners. I told myself there are a lot of old sedans in the world. I told myself I was tired. I pulled up behind it. Same dent on the rear bumper, left side, like a punch. Same air freshener hanging crooked in the center mirror. Same plate. I did not open my door this time. I killed my own lights and watched. Something in the storm shifted and the driver's door began to open by itself, slow like someone inside had weighed it with one finger then let go. The wind pushed the snow straight into the seat. No person. No prints this time either, because the roadway was bare where the tires had been, and the wind erased the rest as it fell. I said out loud, "No," and put the rig in gear and rolled. After 10 minutes, my hands hurt from gripping, and my jaw ached from clenching. The next town was a smear of light that took forever to reach. Inside the gas station, a tired kid handed me a paper towel for my face because I must have looked like I was coming in from a wreck. I called the number dispatch gave for the trooper on duty and told him exactly what I saw. Twice. He said they sent a car to mile 19 as soon as I radioed, then another when I didn't answer on the second check-in. They found nothing both times. No sedan, no purse, no prints. He asked me to repeat the plate. I did. He said the plate belonged to a vehicle reported totaled last year in a rollover, 20 miles from where I sat. "Probably you saw another car and your mind filled in the rest," he said, gentle like he'd had this talk before. I nodded because it was easier than arguing that I had watched the same door open twice with my own eyes. He told me to sleep before I got back on the road and added, "Storms make tricks." I lay in the sleeper without closing my eyes and listened to the wind drag at the seams of the cab like fingers seeking a way in. At sunrise, I walked the snowbank outside on legs that did not feel like mine and stared down the road toward mile 19. White and flat and empty. I keep running that route. Freight doesn't stop for fear. Every winter I hit that stretch in the dark, and every winter I swear I see a weak orange blink at the edge of the white where the road drops a little and the trees huddle up. I do not stop anymore. I wish that made me feel like a bad man. It doesn't. It makes me feel like someone who learned the wrong answer the hard way. I still hear the phone in that empty car buzzing with calls from Mom. I still see the bare feet walking away from heat and into black trees like something had called out there and promised it was warmer. And I still see the door opening slow on a road with no one to open it. Story 3. I grew up in Minnesota. Winter there is a sound before it's a season. Dry air hissing in your nose, the sharp crack of a pond shifting at night. When I was 23, my friend Evan took me to his uncle's cabin by Pelican Lake for a weekend when the world felt dead and safe. First night was beers and dumb stories and the stove huffing like a dog. Second night the wind died and the snow looked ironed flat under a full moon, so bright it felt like day. We stood on the porch to cool off and saw 3 small lights way out on the lake, spaced even, moving slow. We both said, "Fishermen," at the same time, but neither of us believed it. The lights were too smooth, too steady, and they left no glow on the snow. We shut off our porch lantern, and the cabin went black except for the moon. The 3 lights stopped, turned as one, and began to drift our way. I told myself some guys were walking with headlamps down low. I told myself the snow was hard-crusted, and that was why there were no marks. The lights moved faster. They did not bounce. They did not jerk. They slid like things in water. At the shoreline they paused as if thinking, then began to rise. Not high, just until they cleared the surface and hung there, a foot over the ice, bright without shining on anything else. My mouth dried out. Evan whispered a swear and grabbed my sleeve. We took a step back, then another, like men who were not running but wanted to be. The lights began to pulse, left to right, slow then faster, a heart that could not find a rhythm. Then they sank, gentle, and were gone. We stood until our arms hurt from holding still. When they did not come back, we went inside and pushed the couch against the door, even though the thing that scared us lived under the floor of the world, not in the tree line. We slept badly, 2 hours at most. In gray morning, we walked down in our boots to where we had seen them. The lake skin was crazed there with spider lines, stress cracks fanning out in a circle. At the center was a hole you could slip through if you were not careful. Edges glassy, breath rising out of it, like the lake itself was exhaling. Evan dropped a branch down. It fell a long way and hit water with a sound so late my brain tripped. We left that day. His uncle called 2 weeks later to say a strange patch had opened early on that part of the lake, like it had rotted from the bottom up. When the thaw came, he and a neighbor went out in a rowboat to look. At the center they found 3 old lanterns wired together with frayed cord, metal pitted and dull. No batteries, no bulbs, just shells. The wire was new. He said he hauled them up with a rake and dropped them on the dock, and the dock boards boomed like someone had jumped. We did not go back for a long time. When we did, late March, the last ice-like broken glass, the lake looked harmless. People laughed on the opposite shore. You could hear a radio. We stood on the dock and peered down at the water like it might wink. I told myself someone had set lanterns under ice to make art, a prank some kid cooked up with a snowmobile and a drill. I told myself there was a natural gas bubble trapped, and the light bent weird through cold layers. I told myself anything that made it not what it looked like. At night in my apartment, months later, I turned off my phone and lay in the quiet and watched 3 dim coins of light move across the inside of my eyelids like they were looking for a place to come up. If you have never heard lake ice speak, it sounds like a long, metal moan wearing a winter coat. It sounds like a thing trapped, learning its own walls. That winter I learned there are lights that belong to people and lights that belong to places. The first kind help you see your way home. The second kind help themselves to you. Sometimes in December, when the river behind my building skins over for a day and the city goes quiet for a breath, I walk out to the edge and listen. If the world is very still and the cold is very old, I swear I can hear something pulsing under there, left to right, like a slow signal asking a question. I do not want to understand. I do not lean close. I go back inside and leave whatever is talking to the dark water to finish its sentence without me.